It's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to History of Russia Part 5 by Epic History TV. Now, if you haven't seen my reaction to the other episodes in the series, I suggest you watch them and then come back to this one. Excuse me. So there's not much to say. Like I know Epic History TV puts a recap on at the beginning of every episode, and I remember the last episode ended with the assassination of Alexander II, which was perpetrated by officially labelled left-wing terrorists. So anyway, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go subscribe to Epic History TV. Let's not waste more time, let's get into this. And
in 1881, Russian Emperor Alexander II was assassinated by left-wing terrorists in St. Petersburg. Today, the place where he was fatally wounded is marked by the magnificent Church of the Savior.
I've got to give credit to Russian architecture, especially if they've got buildings like this. It looks kind of beautiful.
On spilled blood. Alexander II had been a reformer, hailed as the liberator for freeing Russia's serfs. But his son and successor, Alexander III, believed his father's reforms had unleashed dangerous forces within Russia that ultimately led to his death.
I just want to ask a couple of curious questions. Would most Russians today believe Alexander II would have been a good Tsar if he wasn't assassinated? Because it sounds like he would have been a good Tsar, you know, liberating Russia's serfs. Which, as I said, when it comes to serfdom, there's probably an underlying issue with serfdom, or there's a reason why a lot of people did not want to give it up. Maybe the reasons are not so obvious. Or would most Russians prefer to believe the words of Alexander III, what he said about his father, like with Alexander his father's intentions, you know, bringing in dangerous forces, unlocking dangerous forces in Russia. Sorry, I probably said that wrong.
As emperor, he publicly vowed to reassert autocratic rule.
Whoops.
Declaring that, in the midst of our great grief, the voice of God orders us to undertake courageously the task of ruling with faith in the strength and rightness of autocratic power. The Tsar's secret police, the so-called Okranka, was ordered to infiltrate Russia's many revolutionary groups. Those found guilty of plotting against the government were hanged or sent into internal exile in Siberia. Alexander III was a pious man who supported the Orthodox Church and the assertion of a strong Russian national identity. Russia's Jews became victims of this policy. They'd already been targeted in murderous race riots known as pogroms, after false rumors were spread that they were responsible for the assassination of the emperor.
Or other people would see it as, you know, typical Christian hatred towards Jews, which I'm not a religious man myself, but I never really understood the hatred of Jews from Christians. it doesn't matter if they're Catholic or Orthodox. I just never understood why there was such even before these events, before the events before the assassination of Alexander II, I never understood why Christians in general had a deep hatred for Jews. But it's probably another question that I'm probably not going to get a straight answer for. But as I said, I'm not religious, I'm just really curious.
Now the government expelled 20,000 Jews from Moscow.
Wow.
And many who could began to leave the country.
Probably the best
Over the
option.
next 40 years, around 2 million Jews would leave Russia, most bound for the USA. Concerned by the growing power of Germany, Russia signed an alliance with France, both sides promising military aid if the other was attacked. Sergei Witte was appointed Russia's new Minister of Finance. His reforms helped to modernize the Russian economy and encourage foreign investment, particularly from its new ally, France. French loans helped Russia to develop its industry and infrastructure. Work began on the Trans-Siberian Railway. Completed in 1916, it remains the world's longest railway line, running 5,772 miles,
Wow.
from Moscow to Vladivostok. Alexander III was succeeded by his son, Nicholas II. His coronation was...
I don't know if it's true, but I think someone said that Tsar Nicholas II wasn't fully prepared for this, to take the role of Tsar, apparently.
marred by tragedy when 1,400 people were crushed to death
1,400?
at an open-air
Jeez.
celebration in Moscow. China granted Russia the right to build a naval base at Port Arthur. When China faced a major revolt, known as the Boxer Rebellion, Russia moved troops into Manchuria under the pretext of defending Port Arthur from the rebels. This brought Russia into conflict with Japan, who also had designs over Manchuria and Korea.
Oh, so this is when
The Japanese made a surprise attack on Port.
I was wondering when did the Japanese and Russians come into conflict. I thought it was like a couple of years before World War One, but looks like I was wrong, as usual.
Port Arthur, then defeated the Russian army at the giant Battle of Mukden. Russia's Baltic fleet, meanwhile, had sailed halfway around the world to reach the Pacific, where it was immediately annihilated at the Battle of Tsushima. Russia was left with no option but to sign a humiliating peace, brokered by US President Theodore Roosevelt. Meanwhile, the Tsar faced another crisis much closer to home. In St. Petersburg, a strike by steelworkers had escalated, and plans were made for a mass demonstration. Tens of thousands of protesters marched to the Winter Palace to present a petition to the Tsar, asking for better workers' rights and more political freedom. But instead, troops opened fire on the crowds, killing more than 100.
Did they warn the crowd to disperse, or did they just plainly open fire? Because I don't think that was ever that question was ever answered.
Bloody Sunday, as it became known, led to more strikes and unrest across the country. The crew of the battleship Potemkin mutinied, killing their officers and taking control of the ship. To defuse the crisis, Nicholas II reluctantly issued the October Manifesto, drafted under the supervision of Sergei Witte. It promised an elected assembly and new political rights, including freedom of speech, and was welcomed by most moderates. Russia's first constitution was drafted the next year. For the first time, the Tsar would share power with an elected assembly, the State Duma, though the Tsar had the right to veto its legislation and dissolve it at any time. Sergei Witte finally lost the Tsar's confidence and was dismissed. The Tsar's new Prime Minister, Stolypin, introduced land reforms to help the peasants, while dealing severely with Russia's would-be revolutionaries, so much so that the hangman's noose got a new nickname, Stolypin's necktie. But having survived several attempts on his life, Stolypin was shot and killed by an assassin at the Kiev Opera House. Meanwhile, Grigory Rasputin, a Siberian faith healer, had joined the imperial family's inner circle, thanks to his unique ability to ease the suffering of the Tsar's hemophiliac son, Alexei. Despite sporadic acts of terrorism, Russia now had the fastest growing economy in Europe. Agricultural and industrial output were on the rise. Most ordinary Russians remained loyal to the Tsar and his family. Russia's future seemed bright.
Until World War I.
In 1914, in Sarajevo, a Slav nationalist assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, sparking a European crisis. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, Emperor Nicholas ordered the Russian army to mobilize, to show his support for a fellow Slav nation. Austria-Hungary's ally, Germany, saw Russian mobilization as a threat and declared war. Europe's network of alliances came into effect, and
even though Russia didn't technically, they only mobilized, they didn't declare war on Germany. So I'm kind of unsure how I know they're Austro-Hungarian, they're Austro-Hungary's ally, but I don't know how you would. I'm not an expert on these effects, obviously, but I don't understand how Germany would see it as a threat. Just with Russia just mobilizing and not declaring war. But I'm sure someone's got the answer to that question, and I'm kind of regretting it, but still, it's...
Soon, all the major powers were marching to war. World War I had begun. Russia experienced a wave of patriotic fervor. The capital, St. Petersburg, was even renamed Petrograd to sound less German. An early Russian advance into East Prussia ended with heavy defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes. There was greater success against Austria-Hungary, but that too came at a high price. Russian losses forced the army to make a general retreat in 1915. In 1916, Russia's Brusilov offensive against Austro-Hungarian forces was one of the most successful Allied attacks of the war. But losses were so heavy that the Russian army was unable to launch any more major operations.
Probably what didn't help is, well, not just the Russians communicating with uncoded wireless messages, but Nicholas II's ridiculous idea to dismiss the Grand Duke Nicholas, the commander-in-chief of the Russian army. Because the thing is, as I said, you don't need an expert to know that if the more the Russians face defeat, the more blame will be put right on Tsar Nicholas II. Because it said it in the World War I series.
Rasputin, whose alleged influence over the Tsar's family was despised by certain Russian aristocrats, was murdered, possibly with the help of British agents. The war put intolerable strains on Russia. At the front, losses were enormous, while in the cities, economic mismanagement led to rising prices and food shortages. In Petrograd, the workers' frustration led to strikes and demonstrations. Troops ordered to disperse the crowds refused and joined the protesters instead. The government had lost control of the capital. On board the imperial train at Puskov, senior politicians and generals told the emperor he must abdicate, or Russia would descend into anarchy and lose the war. Nicholas accepted their advice, renounced the throne in favor of his brother, Grand Duke Michael, who effectively declined the offer. 400 years of Romanov rule were at an end. Russia was now a republic. A provisional government took power, but could not halt Russia's slide into economic and military chaos. Workers, soldiers, and peasants elected their own councils, known as Soviets. The Petrograd
Now I know where that word comes from.
Soviet was so powerful it was effectively a rival government, especially as discontent with the provisional government continued to grow. The Bolsheviks, under Vladimir Lenin, attracted growing support, with their radical proposals for an immediate end to the war, the redistribution of land, and transfer of power to the Soviets. In October, they launched a coup, masterminded by Leon Trotsky. Bolshevik Red Guards stormed the Winter Palace, where the provisional government met, and arrested its members. Lenin and the Bolsheviks were now in charge. Russia had been thrown upon a bold and dangerous course. Under a Marxist-inspired revolutionary party, it would now seek to create the world's first communist state. But first it would have to survive the chaos and slaughter of one of history's bloodiest civil wars. Thank you to all.
And that'll do it. This has been another interesting video but from Epic History TV, and I'm sorry if the questions I asked sounded a bit redundant, and some of the information I did give, like on what knowledge I had, it might be a little bit wrong, so it would be ideal if I had like some more input, like constructive input in the comments. But anyway, I'm gonna end up losing my train of thought if I keep rambling. So if you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next